In today's video, I'm revisiting abandoned Warzone maps in 2025. I'm talking about some of the bangers such as Ashika Island, Vondel, and Mazrah. Each of these maps used to be super poppin' with a ton of sweaty people in the lobbies, but now they're complete ghost towns where it's almost impossible to find a game. I will be playing each of these maps and rating them based on 3 categories. The first being map design, the second being combat pacing, and third, replay value. The goal will be to find out which one of these maps aged the best, and maybe should they bring one of these back to either Resurgence or Big Map in the next season. Okay, so for the first map, we are starting with Ashika Island. Now already, one of the reasons why this map I feel is one of the worst maps that Call of Duty's ever brought into the Resurgence landscape is due to, one, the very dark lighting and coloring of the map. Like, I know it's not supposed to be this foggy because it's DMZ now, but even still, it's a very dark and gloomy map, which I feel if you're trying to play like a Resurgence, it should be more vibrant, more bright, more eye-catching. And a second reason why I feel this map was unsuccessful was due to the amount of just water in the map. I feel water in Resurgence is never a good idea, and adding water into the Resurgence map is just a recipe for disaster almost. All right, we're gonna run it here with my team. This is my first time playing DMZ, by the way, so I'm just trying like not to die. I don't have a gas mask. I'm kind of my teammates are already dead. DMZ is actually way harder than like this is insane. All right, let's go visit some of the other POIs before we actually die here. So our goal is we want to get to the castle almost, because that was kind of like the main part of this map, and we're kind of like run through there and see how it's looking in 2025. Cool to see that all my teammates are still alive over there. Now, we're moving on to kind of the middle part of this map. Some of the issues I had with this was that, again, the Tsuki Castle is so large and like, it's just so easy to shoot down on your opponent. I really felt like it made this map pretty one-dimensional, and that is a huge problem that this map has. Now, I will say, I wonder if they added like a ranked mode in Ashika Island. I wonder how that would play out, because I feel this should be more of a competitive map as opposed to something that is more just for like casual day-to-day play. The castle was probably one of my favorite POIs, as there were so many entry points. You were able to enter through the windows, and kind of it was very easy to have third-party and easy engagements with these fights. Now let's move on to some of the hottest spot of the map, being this building right here. I don't know exactly, I guess that POI has no name, but I remember hot dropping here with the squad when this map first came out, and this was, I feel, to be the highlight of the map as a whole. That little section right there. However, due to this map's kind of like overall gloomy vibe, I feel like a lot of Resurgence players didn't really give this map much of a chance, and who can blame them? It really does get dull pretty quickly. Now I should link up with my teammates and see what they're doing. They're doing pretty good. I'm actually gonna go catch up and see what my team is getting into. Well, one actually just went down, ironically, as I say that, so maybe we'll run over here and kind of like leave them and kind of continue exploring some of this map. This was another great area too. I feel like there's a lot of a lot of movement. I feel like what makes a good Resurgence map is, hold on, as I'm getting laced right now. I feel like what makes a good Resurgence map is you need, one, to have a ton of interesting POIs. Okay, moving on to kind of like the residential area. This was another great fight, or another great area to fight at. However, I do feel like, again, just shooting down, the team over here in this area, just shooting down at residential made it very hard for late game rotations. Another reason why I feel like majority of the players didn't like this map. Additionally, the low player count in this game mode, like, you know, Ashika Island in general, kind of is a reason why the map didn't like last. I feel if they would have did more of a Vondel approach, with just 70 people just everyone fighting chaotically, that's kind of like a recipe for success for these resurgence maps. I really do wonder if you could brighten this map up and really like add some color and really increase the player count. I wonder how this thing will play out. For me personally, it was a love-hate with Ashika Island. I just feel like it was one of the worst resurgence maps, but I feel like this was one of the maps that had the most potential. It was kind of botched. Overall, now if we had to give this map an overall score here as my teammate's swimming in the water for his life, I would say in terms of map design, I give this thing about a 5.5 out of 10. Now, if we're talking about the pacing, I do feel like this was a slower map compared to some of the other ones. An issue that a lot of people had with Ashika Island was due to it felt stacky nature, as even though the map is small, there weren't enough people on the map. So everyone kind of grouped and clustered together, which made it very difficult to like have a nice fast-paced overall map. It felt like almost ranked, if you will, even though you weren't playing ranked. So with all that being said, I think I would give the overall combat pacing probably a 5 out of 10. As some of the water sections really dragged it out and really made just gunfights seem impossible. Additionally, with these two towers right here, I don't know exactly what these POIs are called, but these two towers right here, people would sit for days and just kind of sit there and watch. So I feel like this is a very slow map, and for that, the pacing score has to be pretty low. No, my teammate's dead. This might be the end of us. So now, for the overall replay value, I will give this a overall 6 out of 10 for the replay value. I did have some fun with the squad running Ashika Island, I cannot lie. However, I do feel like this is one of the worst rebirth maps, and this map should not be added back to Call of Duty if given a chance. As we play, it looks like my teammate is about to get wiped here, which that's okay because we just about finished up everything. Now we can go over the port, which again, the port was just another watery wasteland. Adding too much water in a map where you can sit here and just hide, like my teammate should be dead. You shouldn't be able to get bailed out for swimming like this. So a watery POI like this is just a recipe for disaster. I can't stress that enough. This map would overall need a huge redesign to be relevant in Call of Duty today. So with that being said, we're going to give the overall Ashika Island as a whole a 5.5 for its total score. For the next map, we are talking about Warzone 2's main Warzone map, Mazrah. This map was initially Warzone's big map, and it completely vanished, and it vanished in quick fashion. A reason for this map's downfall was due to the bad game mechanics that Call of Duty had to offer. This was a time where you couldn't run and play at the same time. There was a lot of issues that Call of Duty had, which was the main reason why this map couldn't flourish. Because I do not believe by any means of the imagination this is a bad map. This is one of the better Call of Duty big maps that actually has been out. Our team wants to do the UAV tower, so that's pretty cool. However, now some of the problems I had with this map in terms of its overall map design is that, again, there's water, but there's not too much water, so I can't be mad, as opposed to like Ashika Island, which was basically, it was an island, so it's basically like all water. You can just swim around all day, right? So for the amount of water, it wasn't too bad. I loved how they added a lot of downtown cities. I feel for a big map, the key to success is you need to be able to have a lot of kind of buildings and things that you can like, that teammates and, you know, enemies can enter and kind of fight, third party. A lot of quick paced engagement. You don't want it to be too hilly, similar to how Caldera was, because that leads for a very slow style of pacing. Now, a problem with the Al Mazrah meta was that this was kind of where the game was very slow, so snipers and vehicles kind of dominated this overall game, and due to that, that made it extremely challenging to push people and kind of push the pace in a map like this. It's very difficult as well when you don't have a lot of entry points to specific buildings. Each building should have a zip, should have multiple points of entry so that a team can't just sit up here all day, which is what they started to do towards the end, but it was too late. People already had a bad impression of this overall map. In terms of the combat, it felt pretty smart and pretty good as long as you had some awareness. You had to play this very slow and strategically. It's not like the Smash Mouth, Rebirth, or fast-paced how Verdansk is now, where you can fly at people. This was a very slow and methodical type of map. As we zip up here and see what our team is doing. This right here was honestly, this was kind of one of the worst parts of the map for me. If we're just looking at the map as a whole, I would say this right here, this area right here was by far one of my favorite parts to land. And especially, I landed here a lot during ranked. We're actually going to try and go over there and see if we can explore some of this. So we're going to take our team's car and kind of explore this map a little bit. I mean, just look at this map, an actual ghost town compared to how it was when it first came out. Driving through the city, there is absolutely no one out here. Let's go now and check some of the major POIs, and we'll kind of review them and get an overall score for this map and get to our last map, Vondel. This was a pretty good area right here. I didn't mind it. A lot of open hill. See, so one of the issues I had was that it was so hard to get up to that top part of the observatory. So the observatory was kind of the map that kind of the POI that Call of Duty marketed as like the main POI. This is where you should be landing if you want to get into your high range, high octane gunfights, right? And it kind of just didn't feel like that. It did at points, but some of the problem was that it was very hard for teams to push up to this map or to this part of the POI due to the hilliness nature of the POI. It just made it very hard for third parties and other people. If you didn't land here, it was very hard to get up here. Now, looking at this POI, I would say this isn't a bad for your major POI. This isn't. It made rotations and pacing very easy as you could jump from place to place, right? You could jump down here. You could go to the village, you know, or you could go fly to the hydro section of the map. So that made it pretty cool in terms of POI compatibility and pacing. However, this map still has a lot of downfalls. Because I feel what makes a good map is you want more chaotic. You want more chaotic, but you want to have like a nice balance, which that's what Verdansk kind of does. So moving on to this far area, the village, and as well as the airport, I just feel like given the maps kind of like slow pacing and playstyle, you didn't really see many parts of the map, which I feel like now that I'm moving towards this airport over here, which is kind of like you see at the bottom part, this was one of the best POIs in my opinion of the map, but you kind of didn't really get to see too often because of how far it was away from everything in the area. We're going to grab this car right here so we can explore some more of this POIs without being interrupted by bots. Just make my way. Oh no, I might be dead here. Hold on. Working my way to this car. Gonna put a plate on. Hit the car. We're good to go, fellas. We're gonna continue exploring this map. Now, as we move towards my favorite part of the map, airport, I will show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. How you can't really, or you never really go to this part of the map. Looking at this POI is pretty flat, which is very good for combat, as it's not too hilly. People don't really sit and camp. The tower was pretty campy, but it was so far out that you didn't really mind it being over here. This was a great area. You had a lot of ways you could maneuver and fight different fights. So I really did like this area of the map. I just wish that they had more industrial areas like this throughout the map, and it wasn't surrounded by so much hills, right? Because that's the main thing. It's just a hilly map. You want more cities, you want more vibrance, you want more color. That's what you want when you're playing this type of game mode. Well, not this type of game mode, this type of game in general. We're gonna head over to this part, this green ping over here, and then we're gonna go and review our final map. So with that being said, now that we're talking about the overall map design, I think it's time for us to move past that in the combat pacing to the overall replay value of this map. Now, for the replay value of this map, I do feel like it had some pretty high replay value. At the time, it was the only big map that you could play in this game, which means that you kind of were almost forced to play it. However, due to the bad state that Call of Duty was in, a lot of people didn't want to play because of how slow the game was. But still, it did have some good replay value when playing a lot with a nice squad of friends if you had on all together at once. But this isn't the map, and this was a very hard map to solo squad in. Of course, there were people that were able to solo squad, but in terms of just the overall general public, it was very difficult to solo squad given the movement challenges within this map. Now, as we're driving to the next POI over here, we're getting laced out this car, by the way. Low, I forgot you had to refuel vehicles in this game mode, which that was another bad thing for the map. It was a little too realistic. We're gonna go over here and park and actually swap vehicles. We can continue driving. Okay. Moving to this part of the map. This part of the map had very low replay value for me in terms of just pacing, very slow, very hilly. Like, it's very easy to sit and hide and camp and just hold top positioning, which is a reason why this was a very bad big map POI. For some reason, this map just never hit the addictive kind of replay loop that Verdansk did for me when it first came out, and how Verdansk does right now in 2025. In short, I believe that this map was a way better DMZ map than actual map for Warzone, as is very tactical, very slow paced. This is a great DMZ map, and I feel like it makes perfect sense as the developer's main point of interest with this game was to focus on DMZ, as it was a POI or a game mode that they were very interested in developing. I believe we will drive over and try and check out this last POI, and I think we will be just about able to review and rate everything with this map and move on to our last map here. Like, another issue I had, man, I just feel like there's a lot of like overall dead space with this map. So much potential, but so much wasted given its hilly nature, and given the harsh realism that Call of Duty was trying to during this era of COD, made it very difficult to enjoy this. Call of Duty has always and always will be an arcade shooter. It should leave the realism to other games, as Call of Duty's bread and butter is arcade. It's quick, snappy movements. Like, look at all this. This is literally just a wasteland of dunes, desert, and sand. This is something you don't want in a Call of Duty Warzone map. And again, how often do you remember any of the POIs in this map? If I asked you, name me 3 POIs in this map, you probably couldn't even without looking, which goes to show how this map has some cool POIs, but none actually memorable. With that being said, I think we can go ahead and end off on Al Mazrah. For map design, we will give this map a 7.5. It had potential. However, I feel it was lacking some things, such as it's very open, not enough buildings, too much sand, as it makes the map just seem very dull and kind of bland. In terms of pacing, I will give this probably about a 4 out of 10. This was a very slow map. We can't remember in the era of which Call of Duty we were playing it. This is where you couldn't run and play at the same time, couldn't sprint. This was a very slow paced game. Call of Duty wanted this to play out as a DMZ, and for that, the pacing was just downright awful on this map. And that's something that has to fix if you want to bring this map back in 2025. Lastly, for the replay value, we will give this a 5 out of 10. This is a map that I do not believe should be back in 2025 and can kind of remain dead altogether. Okay, for our final map on our tour of visiting all the abandoned maps in Warzone, we have Vondel. Now, they gave us a beautiful map, but then it vanished, quite frankly. It disappeared. In terms of Vondel's POIs, I feel they were very smooth and very memorable. Something that they have a lot of hot spots that you don't forget. Another reason due to that is because of the high player count, which made like hot drops, really hot drops. So some of the POIs like Market and Mall, they're very easy names and very memorable POIs, as they're not over complicated. This map would also be, to what I would say, almost zero filler, in terms of just a map where It doesn't have too much. There's not a lot of water. Like everything is just perfect to where there's not enough, where there's not too much of just unnecessary things that can really make a resurgence map pretty bad. So when we're scrolling through some of these POIs, I will say some of the best ones are going to be this mall side over here, honestly, because there's so much you can do here. There's a lot of ability for outmaneuvering your opponent, as well as a lot of enemies just in general in one specific area. However, I will say one of the negatives of Vondel was its specifically rooftop and stairwell dominant fights, right? This map had a ton of stairwells, and basically all you're doing is fighting teams of 4 stacks with fire shotguns in a stairwell, or teams of snipers on top of a rooftop. However, if you were able to get past that and figure out how to kind of combat that, this map could have been it has very good playability. I do believe that ranked, if this map would have had a ranked resurgence mode, I do believe that this map could have had the ability to last very long as a resurgence map. I do feel like this would be a very interesting map. It might have been a little too hectic and chaotic for a ranked system, as there's a lot of teams that would be on this map, so it would be very chaotic and very smash mouth, but I think that's what we needed from a rank, to be honest. Additionally, the visual style of the map was very colorful and very easy to read and very eye-catching, which you would love to just look at and play this map. I know it's gloomy because we're on DMZ, but aside from that, this is a very beautiful map with a lot of very interesting POIs and things you can do. We're going to check out some of these rooftops real quick. So a lot of these fights were predominantly stairwell, and I know that's not ideal, especially when there was a fire shotgun around during this meta. There's a lot of maneuverability when you can jump from side to side like so. You can get easy picks like this, right? There's a lot of ways you can outplay your opponent, which is what I loved about Vondel. Additionally, in terms of audio, the audio just for some reason worked better on this map than some of the others, like Ashika Island, where it felt like it was almost unable to hear footsteps. Just something I thought I'd add in there, but you can't really base that into the overall rating of the map, right? And a thing I will say is that most of the buildings on this map had a very common theme. There were 3-story buildings, with one being your bottom floor, and then you had like a little place where you could like maneuver between enemies. You had your second level, which had a few rooms you could sit in, and then you had your third level where essentially you could kind of have easy access to the roof, right? And this is predominantly every building, so you don't have to look at every building. That's basically how, whoa, wow. That's basically how every building went. But it looks like we're dead here, so we're just going to kind of spectate some of our teammates and get kind of the end of this map. So my one teammate right here is in the police station. Another very popular POI that had a lot of people landing there. It was the highest spot of the map, so you were kind of able to jump off and go to the mall. You were able to go to stadium. There's a lot of POIs that you could travel to from police station, which was the main reason why I was one of the hotspots. I think our teammate might be dead here, to be honest with you. We'll go to our other teammate and check out the mall. Another, like I said, I can't stress enough, one of my favorite POIs and memorable POIs of the map. I wish that University could have been potentially in the center of the map. I feel like it was such a good POI that you really didn't even get to visit much because it was on the corner of the map. And just the way the gunfights were, predominantly most of the fighting kind of went from mall to market was a hot spot. You had some stadium, some zoo, and this was kind of like, I feel, the hot spot of the map. So some of these POIs like Castle, you didn't really head over there too much unless you got a bad end circle pull, or especially Fire Depot and Floating District. I feel like I was rarely ever over there in that section of the map. Now, with all that being said, I will say this type of map encouraged a lot of unique and different type of loadouts, which one can appreciate. Even though, of course, Call of Duty is a meta-based game, I do feel like there were a lot of different and unique metas, like you said, fire shotguns and akimbo pistols, which, not that those should be meta, but it did inspire a lot of metas due to its close quarters combat, right? I feel like in terms of Warzone 2025, this map could have definitely stood with the Rebirth Island as another resurgence map that maybe could have been intertwined or on a rotation to where people could still play this. This map should not be abandoned. But let's go over the overall rating and score. Now, when you talk on basic map design, I will give this an overall 9 out of 10. It had a really good map design, a lot of memorable POIs, and a lot of cool, unique places and ways you could outmaneuver against your opponent that made this map very fun to play. Especially if you had high IQ, high Warzone IQ. Moving on to the combat pacing, this is going to be at another 9. This map was a very fast-paced map back when it was around as the main Resurgence map. There was a ton of players on, the most players ever on a Resurgence map, which is a reason why the map was such a fast-paced and loved by a lot of people in the Rebirth community. You were able to drop a lot of high kill games because there was just so much players on the map. And who doesn't love dropping high kill games, especially on a Resurgence arcade style shooter? Now, moving on to the overall replay value, I will give this a 8.5 out of 10. This had a high replay value as there were so many people on the map. You could drop such high kills and be like, man, I just want to play this again. Especially when playing with a group of 4, a 4-man squad, you could have so much fun as everyone on the squad could get about 10 kills, even if you weren't that great of a Resurgence player. A lot of people told me that their PRs were mostly on Vondel, which goes to show how quickly the pacing and replay value of this map was. With that being said, I will give the overall rating of this game mode a 8.8 out of 10. Vondel is the winner of this test that we did today. Vondel should be back in Resurgence, and I feel it for sure should not be abandoned in 2025 today. Let me know in the comment section what you think, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to smash that like and subscribe for me. I'd appreciate it so much, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.